I have returned. All right, Neil Gorsuch. Last week, you remember, one of the rulings from the fascist Supreme Court was to strip the EPA of its ability under the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from power plants during a global heat wave and in this expanding climate emergency. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, but Neil Gorsuch, the first of three appointees by the filthy, rotten pig Donald Trump, he joined Sammy the Fish Alito in writing a concurring opinion. And really what Gorsuch wrote was a 19-page endorsement of the gutting of an agency his mother once ran. Now, just as Alito, who wrote the majority opinion ending the right of woman's privacy, just as Alito was known as the justice most committed to destroying Roe v. Wade because Alito is such a Christian terrorist, well, Gorsuch is known for his longstanding hostility to environmental law and regulation. See, this kind of shit doesn't come up. It's not glamorous enough. Environmental law and regulation, oh, how would you rule on that? Nobody asks those kinds of questions during a confirmation hearing, and these fuckers would lie anyway. A New York Times editorial pointed out when Gorsuch was first mentioned as a nominee, the Times editorial pointed out, quote, he is even more conservative than Justice Scalia in at least one area, calling for an end to the deference courts traditionally show to administrative agencies like the EPA. Now, yeah, the courts usually do defer to rules and regulations written by these regulatory agencies because I think the courts understand that the only check on predatory capitalism we have is regulatory agencies who can try to keep them in check. So you can make the argument that Gorsuch's opinions regarding environmental law may have as much to do with maternal trauma as any other part of conservative ideology. When you have poison air, what's a newborn supposed to breathe? What's a 3-year-old supposed to breathe? Now, Anne Gorsuch, she was EPA administrator during it was Reagan's term. And at the time, this little fucker Gorsuch was 16 years old. And he moved with his mom to D.C. before she caused the first major scandal of the Reagan administration. You know, the Reagan administration, if you take a look at the scandals of people who were arrested, charged with crimes, and who actually went to prison, you see the Reagan administration was, even more than Trump's, one of the most corrupt administrations in the history of this country. Take a look. I mean, don't listen to what I'm saying. Look it up. Now, Anne Gorsuch appointment was assured after she agreed with Reagan's budget director, David Stockman, that the EPA would do just fine, thank you very much, with a 50% cut in funding. And before she went to Washington, Anne Gorsuch was a Colorado state representative. She was already well known in her efforts against environmental enforcement. And she brought all that shit with her and her son to the Capitol. And her chief counsel at the EPA was a lawyer from Exxon. And her chief enforcement officer was a lawyer from General Motors. Jesus fucking Christ. You see what Reagan started, right? Of course you do. And then there's this. This is from the New York Times. I want to share this. I'm sorry. This is from Common Dreams. In 1981, Ms. Gorsuch met with executives from a small Southwest gasoline refiner, Thriftway Company. And she told the company representative that it didn't make sense to enforce EP regulations on removing lead from gas because unleaded gasoline rules were already in the works. And after the meeting, she talked with a Senate aide who then caught up with the Thriftway reps and relayed the message that Gorsuch hoped they'd gotten the point. What she was telling them, what Gorsuch, as EPA administrator, was telling this gasoline refining company is ignore the law. Don't pay any attention to it. In the fall of 1982, the House Energy Committee requested EPA documents on hazardous waste dumps and some questionable Superfund enforcement decisions. Do you remember the Superfund? Money that was supposed to clean up the hideously toxic messes that capitalist America was leaving all over the fucking country. The White House, that would be the Reagan White House, ordered Gorsuch to withhold documents under the executive privilege, so-called rule. Reagan told her, or somebody who spoke for Reagan said, Ann, don't let that shit go. Just keep it quiet, okay? And then there was a woman, I don't know how many of you remember this bitch's name, Rita Lavelle. She was an EPA staffer who ran the hazardous waste program. And Rita Lavelle took this as a sign to start shredding scores of subpoenaed documents, including documents on the suspension of safety rules of waste disposal. Just like Oliver North's secretary, Fawn Hall, destroyed documents concerning our involvement with our enemies in Iran, selling TOW missiles to Iran, which is what also happened during the Reagan years. I'm telling you, the Reagan administration was just fucking unbelievably corrupt. But anyway, this congressional investigation of the EPA and what they were doing, it went on to find that the Superfund program under Ann Gorsuch was being transformed into a lawyer subsidy program where these lawyers would make just tons of money. There were illegal private meetings with regulated companies were taking place. Closed-door deals were being made to reduce fines on polluters. Government appointees were continuing to represent past clients who had ongoing conflicts with the EPA. And in the midst of all this, maybe you'll remember this, flooding in the Midwest spread dioxin contamination through the town of Times Beach, Missouri. Does that ring a bell? Sure does with me. And that led to the emergency evacuation of 2,000 families. Times Beach. Now, if that doesn't ring a bell, I realize it was 40 years ago. Look it up. I think you're going to be shocked with what you find. Anyway, as scrutiny intensified by media of what these son of a bitches were doing, Gorsuch was forced to resign, and along with her, 20 of her top appointees were forced to resign. Rita Lavelle eventually served 6 months in jail for perjury and obstruction of justice. This is back in the day when we would lock these fuckers up. So all of this is Neil Gorsuch's mother. So all of this undoubtedly left a lasting remark on young Neil. And 1 year after Ann Gorsuch resigned, Neil's mommy, the Supreme Court ruled in Chevron versus NRDC, National Resource Defense Council, that federal agencies like the EPA should have broad latitudes to decide how to enforce the law. And that so-called Chevron case became a cornerstone of administrative law underlying federal power. And it was done for the right reason. Fast forward to this fucker Neil Gorsuch. When he was a federal appellate court judge, he according to Common Dreams, expressed skepticism that the courts should defer to government agencies' interpretation of the laws they enforce, instead of listening to what the conservative lawmakers are saying. One of those examples was the occupational health implications of COVID-19 or the air quality impacts of global warming. Gorsuch was one of those who said, oh, you don't need masks. Oh, you don't need distancing. Oh, there's no such thing as global warming. This is what Christian terrorists do 24/7. And now, this rotten fucker has gutted the ability of most expert agencies, particularly the EPA, to take any significant actions in response to these threats from polluters. You can say that his mommy would be very proud of him. Abso-fucking-lutely. So when you think about Neil Gorsuch, you might also want to think about his mommy, who was corrupt, a criminal, was forced to resign. Some of her people went to prison. And then little Neil winds up as a Supreme Court justice. Unfucking real. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.